Hey everyone, Warwick's here. So in today's video, excuse me. So in today's video, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and quickly discuss some hot takes. We're about a week out as I record this. In fact, we are a week out as I record this from patch 11.2 dropping, which means final patch of the War Within, and we are starting to get like headlong straight into midnight. Now, this is going to be more of like an audio post. There's not any gameplay that I'm going to do, but if you're actively watching the video, enjoyed this all druid raid that we did. My guild just did an all druid raid just as a little fun activity to play with each other. We actually did end up 9-manning. It was normal, just because I wanted to make it a stress-free night and just, let people play something a little bit different and, all the orange in there. It was really funny when we were calling for battle reses. So we were basically arguing over who was going to stop DPS or stop healing to actually do the battle res. But, so enjoy that. If otherwise, you can probably just stick this on in the background, go back to whatever tab it is that you were doing your important thing on rather than listening to me. But I wanted to make this video because it's been sitting on my mind, and some of these I've discussed with people before, but I just wanted to get a sense of, putting this out into the nether realm, that is YouTube, and just get people's thoughts on it. I know a couple of these I'm probably going to get some massive hate for, but a couple of these I'm hoping that maybe people see it the same way I do. But these are 4 hot takes that I don't think the WoW community is ready to discuss. Now, again, this is just my opinion. You can agree or disagree. Just keep it civil down in the comments. But yeah, these are just things that I wanted to kind of talk about because I think these are things that if we can change... A couple of these, I think if we change the perception around them, then we can definitely take steps as a community to improve the game. A couple of these are probably a little bit of begging from me to Blizzard to make these changes. So wanted to discuss those. And let's start with hot take number 4. I tried to organize these as the ones that I think are probably from the coldest to the warmest to the hottest hot takes or whatever. But we'll see. So number 4, the majority of players care too much about the quote-unquote meta when it doesn't actually impact them and the goals that you have. So this is referencing to things like the meta Mythic Plus comps, the meta classes in Raid, the quote-unquote meta gearing process, the content creators that make all these lists of things you should do in the first week to get ready for Raid or get to this eye level super fast type situation. Spoiler, I'm actually going to be making one that'll go out tomorrow when this releases. This will release, I believe, on Wednesday, and the gearing video will come out Thursday. So, I'm part of the problem in that regard, but mine's going to be focused more from a casual to mid-core level type thing. If you want to do some things to try and accelerate your gearing, we'll talk about it later. So it's those types of thoughts and approaches. A lot of WoW players approach the game like this, even though the truth is that the majority of WoW players, in fact, I would say the overwhelming majority of WoW players, do not actually have to worry about this stuff at all. So I'm of the opinion that around 98% of the players in WoW actually don't need to worry about what is quote-unquote meta. I've heard the argument that it's if I play this meta class, then I'm going to get invited to pickup groups easier, or if I'm, playing this class that does all the damage, then I'm going to guarantee my raid spot. I don't think that matters. I think more people should focus on playing what is fun to them and less about what's the strongest class. Because the truth is that despite the fact that classes themselves may not do, or specs themselves may not do perfect levels of damage close to each other, you have obviously we've all seen the Wowhead posts where it's Devastation Evoker's the number 1 DPS right now, and Frost Mage is the lowest DPS, and they're 5 to 7% difference. Based off Warcraft log stuff, but that data itself is kind of flawed. So it's a situation where we have to be very, very careful about how we think about that data. I actually also firmly believe that instead of being a flavor of the month, what's dubbed the Bottom Chaser, Flavor of the Month chaser, where every patch you figure out, okay, here's the strongest tank, here's the strongest DPS, or here's the strongest healer. I'm gonna play that. And so you constantly have to like re-gear characters and go through the process. Now, for some people, that is how they enjoy the game. And I'm not sitting here saying that that is a wrong way to enjoy the game. I think it's a weird way to enjoy the game, but it's not wrong. Everyone has, you know, your sub, you pay your $15 a month. But for majority of players, I think that they would get more out of the game if it meant that people played more of what they enjoy. Like, I've got a guy on my, I use a couple of examples from my current guild, is that we've got a guy that's a Destro Warlock one trick. He hasn't hit the activate spec button on any other spec in years. No matter what, he, you know, some patches, obviously when Destro is very powerful, he's one of the top DPS. If Destro is not very powerful, he's one of our middle DPS. But the thing is that he utilizes his utility and his ability to survive in ways that I can't do on Destro Warlock, because he's just got all this experience. He has seen every situation possible and knows how to live. A lot of the times when we call a wipe, the number one joke that he makes is, I'm fine, because he's sitting there at nearly full health while everyone else is dead. It's because he just knows how to survive. He knows how to use the kit that's given to him to do things. Same thing goes with our Shadow Priest. He's been playing Shadow Priest since vanilla WoW, basically. And so because of that, like, he's the same way. He really knows how to utilize that utility and utilize the skills in his kit. He has legitimately saved a boss kill because he was able to life grip someone that was not doing the mechanic correctly, and he gripped them over to where they needed to be. Off we went. So I'm always of the opinion that, like, for me, I consider myself a 3K player. I've now achieved 3K twice. I got it again this season. In fact, I've gotten almost 2 characters there this season. Not that that's difficult in a lot of people's eyes, but it is one that, like, it's something that I've achieved. So I know kind of like the upper end of what's considered the casual player or the mid-core player. I will gladly take a Feral Druid or a Windwalker Monk or a Survival Hunter, you know, these classes and specs that are considered extremely quote-unquote off-meta because low representation, or they're not, quote, community perceives them to be weaker than what they really are. I'd rather take those players, because if I've got a Survival Hunter or a Feral Druid that's running into a 13 key and is sitting close to 3K or at 3K as that spec, like, that's a player that I definitely want over random mage 256,744 who's only playing it because mage is the strongest class this patch, or Boomkin that was the strongest class this patch. So my solution here is play the specs that you like. Like, if you enjoy Survival Hunter, if you enjoy Preservation Evoker, if you enjoy, you know, Brewmaster Monk, play the specs, even the ones that aren't quote unquote deemed powerful, and run your own keys if it's that, or talk to, you know, your raid leads about what you can do to potentially get a spot into the raid. And if they tell you something other than like if you're a Survival Hunter, for example, and they tell you, hey, you got to play Marks to get into this raid, that's probably not a raid team that you want to be a part of anyways, in my opinion. But, like, just have conversations with people, like, be an adult. The other thing is that if you run your own key and you have some of these specs pop up, legitimately invite them. You will probably be very surprised at just how good some of those players are at those specs that are not as well represented or are deemed not meta, because those players have dedicated the time and definitely the time to go through and say, hey, I'm doing all I can with this spec. So the truth about the meta, in my opinion, in my view, is that unless you're in a top 50 world guild from the raid rankings, maybe top 100, but definitely top 50, or you're someone that is in the title range for Mythic Plus titles or doing world first level keys, the meta actually doesn't matter. Because believe it or not, Blizzard does tune all the the specs are all tuned that they can do things. Some of it may require slightly more effort on your part and things like that, and that is a problem of tuning, not a problem of you playing that spec. But it is capable. Like, for a majority of players, their goals are AOTC, every spec can perform very well in AOTC situations. It might be to get KSM. Every spec definitely do KSM. I mean, hell, I barely picked up Survival Hunter, like barely at all this patch. I played it historically, so I know a little bit of what I'm doing, but like I could start that spec tonight with like 5 days left, and I could get KSM very quickly. And that's not even necessarily, you know, if I played enough, I could go through and do it. I won't have time, but I could do it if I completely pugging, because it's just like, it's very, very possible. You know, KSH 2500, completely doable by all specs. 3K Keystone Legend, also very doable by every single spec. It's really only once you're getting into like the truth is, it's like 17s, 16s, 17s, 18s, 19s, 20s. And I would argue even probably not even the 16s and 17s, like 18s and up are probably like, that's the point where the meta starts to really, 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 really matter. But 0.1% of players are going to that level, maybe 0.2% of players. That leaves 99.8% of players in the realm where they can actually play anything that they want and have success with it. All right, hot take number 3. This is going to talk about WoW storytelling. WoW relies too heavily on 2 storytelling tropes: redemption arcs and enemy of my enemy is my friend tropes, particularly when it comes to their female antagonists. All right, so little quick history lesson. We're in the 3rd expansion in a row where we're going to have one of these tropes pop up with a popular female antagonist. So in Shadowlands, obviously we had Sylvanas. Gets the redemption arc, turns on the jailer in Sepulchre of the first ones, or before Sepulchre of the first ones, and you know, helps us through, and then gets the punishment of this that is essentially cleaning dog poop in the backyard. You know, releasing souls in the maw, where basically she had been living this entire expansion and just releasing all the souls. That's like cleaning up dog shit in the backyard. It's not an actual punishment. She should have died. Anyways, but she gets that redemption arc and a little bit of enemy of my enemy arc there. In Viranoth and Dragonflight, which is the most egregious one of these, she literally turns against her brothers with like barely any in-game reason given. We don't get any sort of scenes from her point of view. We get like one, oh, I don't really like this look, when Iridacron sends Farrak down into Avarice. And that's it. Other than that, she turns on him in a Mirdrasil for like literally no reason. Most of that storytelling, unfortunately, was done outside of the game, which is moronic in my opinion. It's good to have supplementary things coming from, you know, outside of the game, but like most of your main character story should be told in the game. Now we're getting Xal'atath. For those of you that have been living under a rock, Xal'atath is joining forces with us in patch 11.2 because Dimensius is back. And without spoiling the reasons, all that behind the story, for those that want to experience that, basically Xal'atath doesn't want him back for reasons that you'll find out when you play the story. So she begrudgingly uses us, which, you know, some people say exactly, she's using you, she's not becoming your friend. But it's still the enemy of my enemy is my friend setup. To me, this is like, we'll see if she gets a redemption arc. Like, it wouldn't shock me at all. I'd be very disappointed, but it wouldn't shock me if Blizzard all of a sudden decided, hey, she's really popular amongst the fans. Well, really, her feat are very popular amongst the fans. We can't kill her. Because I think that's what they did with Sylvanas. I truly believe that. As much as I love Patty Madison as a voice actress, that's a job that she probably should have lost after Shadowlands. But with Xal'atath, like, would anyone be shocked if we get a redemption arc? I think some people would. I wouldn't, because it's just how Blizzard tells their stories now. Now the evidence points towards us not having that. In fact, there's probably more evidence that we're going to end up fighting Xal'atath as one of the last bosses of Midnight. But like, the fact that they use these tropes all the time in their storytelling is just kind of lazy, and it lacks creativity. And frankly, the writers at Blizzard, I think, are way smarter than that. I'm giving them much more credit than maybe they give themselves. And like I said, it's always a female protagonist. Like, Garrosh didn't get a redemption arc. We killed him. You know, the jailer didn't get a redemption arc. Gul'dan didn't get a redemption arc. Now, these are like truly evil dudes, yes. but none of them had an enemy of my enemy is my friend situation. None of them had the redemption arc. Like, really the only male character that I can think of immediately that gets a redemption arc throughout WoW's early history is Varian. And even then, that's not really a redemption arc, more so as it's just putting his soul back together. And maybe Anduin at this point. But like, Blizzard is allergic to making their female antagonists stay true antagonists the entire time, and I don't understand why. Alright, number 2 hot take. So I think we can all agree that WoW's best content is its dungeon content and its raid content. I don't think there's anyone arguing any of those. But outside of those 2 forms of content, WoW's best content in its history is class-based, not things that are faction-based or even their zone stories. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some amazing zone stories out there. Even the War Within had a really good one in Hellafall, in my opinion. I'm a big personal bias to everything that happens on Kultiris, for example. So they have amazing zone stories and things like that that are 100% forms of content that we can do something about. But if you go back and ask a lot of like current classic players or players that are older and or were around back when classic was quote unquote vanilla, a lot of them will probably tell you that their not favorite content to do outside of raid, particularly back then, was class quests. Like, I still remember in my early days in vanilla as a rogue, going around and getting my unlocking all my poisons and doing all of that. Priests had obviously the benediction quest line that came from a raid drop, but like, it was a quest you had to solo. Druids getting their different forms, shamans getting their totems, things like that. Fast forward into something like Legion, and you had the class order halls, which I think is content that legitimately propped up early Legion, because legendaries were very random. They were not well accessed. The Azerite or their artifact power system was very unrefined, borderline unusable outside of like one spec Andes. And Emerald Nightmare was not a very well received raid. The zone stories were fine. I don't think they were great, but I think they were fine. So it was really the class order halls and the artifact weapons that held up that early one. And a lot of people are still to this day very excited to go back in and do the class order halls. It's 12 mostly good stories. There's a couple that I think don't hold up all that well. But you get increased artifact power. You get your appearances for your artifact. You got eventually the mount with the Argus campaign, although Blizzard, please remove balance of power from being a requirement for that. Like, let us just complete the class order hall campaign and then get them out with it. Please just make, like, that level of grind for content that is no longer current is insane and dumb and shouldn't be legal. But anyways, like, still to this day, people always are like, man, I kind of wish the class order halls would come back, that we'd have more story with them. And this is the perfect time to do something like introduce an Evoker one. Obviously, we have Legion Remix coming up, and I've heard a lot of people say, I'm playing Legion Remix not because of Remix Mythic Plus or going back and doing Taurus again. I want to do the class. It was the Mage Tower too, because people thought you're going to get the weapon appearances. Found out you're not. But a lot of it's class order halls, being able to go get those appearances and then do something like, hey, I'm going to do this plus 15 key so I can get all these appearances. Or I'm going to go do XYZ so I can get this artifact appearance, or get this armor mod from my class hall. Like, that is truly like the biggest thing with that. And like I said, it's all class based. So I think Blizzard should do more class based content. People, I think these days, particularly in retail, identify much more with the classes that they play, not with the faction that they play. In the way that, do either of them truly matter type situations. But if you give players good class content to do with a good story revolving around their class, something like the order halls coming back, I think you're going to see like weekly retention and play rates actually go up, because people love doing stuff that is like, I'm a warrior, so I get this cool thing because I'm a warrior. So definitely would love to see that come back. All right, and the final one, which is I think this is going to be the hottest take of them all. I get looked at. I've said this to a few people, and they think I'm crazy for it. Tier sets are an active detriment to the game. That's right, I said it. So again, we're going to go back and talk about a little bit of the history. So there is a community. I don't know if Blizzard sees it this way, but I know the community does, for those that have played WoW for a while now. There is a 3 expansion that are all kind of grouped together, and they're all dubbed the Borrowed Power era by a lot of players. And that's Legion, Battle for Azeroth, and Shadowlands, where you had these items or things that were not going to be full-time. They were only going to be part-time. So in the case of Legion, it was the artifact weapons. In the case of BFA, it was Azerite armor. Despite the fact that I don't think it was implemented the greatest way, it still like gave a lot of specs a lot of power. And then in Shadowlands, you had everything around your covenants. So these were things that were basically there for that expansion, and then you lost them, and you felt worse as a result. Whether it was moving into the next expansion, or like if you didn't have this up to the same level that everyone else did, then you were behind. That said, tier sets have been around for a long time and are borrowed power. Now, the argument that I've heard against this is that tier sets are temporary. They only last you, 6 months in the current sort of cycle that WoW has established for itself. Whereas, those things you had to deal with them for 2 years, but I don't think that actually matters. Like, why does something that you only have for 6 months make it less kind of infuriating? So there's two aspects that I want to look at this from. I want to look at this from a gearing prospect and from the class design prospect. So the gearing prospect I think is a lot easier, and that with, we're kind of going back into that borrowed power system. So you look at this expansion, we've had Cersei Circlet, we've had the disc belt, we're getting the Rushy Wraps in 11.2, and then we also have, 4 slots of gear locked into your tier set. Now, we're not going to be using Cersei Circlet at all in this next patch. The disc belt, for most players, if they do any sort of content that's like 10 plus, you're going to be able to replace it, probably about halfway through the patch. But the Rushy Wraps you're going to have for the rest of time. But in the early part of the season, you've got your disc belt that's locked in. You've got your 4 pieces of tier that are locked in. So that's 5 slots. And then a lot of people are going to be running either crafted weapons. So a 2-hander or 1-hand dual wield or 1-hand shield, 1-hand offhand, staff, that sort of thing. So that's 1 to 2 slots more. So again, we're talking now 6 to 7. And then a lot of the times you're going to have at least 2 other crafted items on top of that, whether it's a lot of people, it's like things like a ring and bracers. And then out of the raid, there are a set of boots off the quote unquote optional boss that are 100% going to be, depending on what it does, a lot of people think they're going to end up being mandatory because it increases the proc rate on your Rushy Wraps. So now we're looking at, okay, from a lot of people, it's going to be much better for them to craft a 680, the equivalent of a 681 weapon, versus going in and trying to get a myth track weapon out of Vault or out of Mythic Raid, which a lot of people don't do. It's going to be easier for them to craft, say, like a bracers versus getting, again, a mythic drop. You got your 4 pieces of tier that are set up, so we're at 6. And then you got your Rushy Wraps. That's 7 slots. So half our slots are gone before we even really get the opportunity to look at things. And then for things like tier, some of it may not be good for your spec. Like you might be, for example, a Shadow Priest is a Haste Mastery spec. You might get a tier piece that has crit verse on it for some reason. Those are stats you really don't care about. So now all of a sudden you're having to be a little less optimized, which a lot of people care about, in order to get your 4-piece bonus. Now some of that again is class design, but I do think there's an issue on the gearing side for that. If we ended up removing tier and not making it part of the game, that's 4 more slots that we can optimize our stats more from. Now, I know the argument would just be, oh, you would just craft in those slots instead, but it does open up Blizzard to create this opportunity to create more interesting items. So, like, some of the more interesting items that Blizzard makes, obviously trinkets are always of interest to people, and what trinket should I get, what trinket should I use, things like that. And then we've seen a rise in what are called cantrip weapons. So things like best in slots that have an on-use effect or a passive effect, like the Void Reaper's Warpblade did in the Nerebar Palace raid. Things like that, where you have these weapons that have these on-use effects, or you get something like the cloak from Rashanon, things like that have like these cool on-use effects. You can add more of those types of stuff in. Now, I have an issue with a majority of damage being passive, but that's a class design issue. But it does allow for that to have more interesting gearing options for people, rather than being like, oh, I've got to lock in these 4 slots. I don't ever have to think about them. It makes rewards less satisfying because, you know, I've got Myth Track tier, but I know I'm doing this dungeon that has, you know, a shoulder, a chest, and a leg that all drop for me. You know, they're all in the loot table. I know that if I get any of those drops, it's useless because I've already got the best item. Or even at Hero Track, a lot of the time, you're not going to get, you know, I've got Hero Track tier. I'm not going to upgrade this Hero Track drop that I got in this dungeon. This dungeon is now effectively useless for me to do other than other reasons, things like Mythic Plus score. So it makes the rewards process feel a lot less satisfying in the game. And one of the things that Blizzard has always talked about is they want rewards to feel satisfying in game. So why did they lock us into 4 pieces immediately? Give us, you know, the 4-piece bonuses could be 2 pieces, like combine the set bonuses, and then we only have 2 pieces. Maybe make it chest and legs all the time, and then mog the rest of the set, like you can with, like, you know, everything else. Like you can catalyze like your bracers and stuff like that, but you only need maybe the 2 pieces. So, like, you know, feeling like half of your stuff is slotted out, and a large part of it is because of tier and the borrowed power items that we're getting throughout the rest of this expansion, that we've gotten throughout this expansion, I think it just makes the thing feel bad overall. All right, from the class design side, I mean, I have a lot of issues with how Blizzard is approaching their class design. I think, generally speaking, it's pretty one note. The big thing, I think, is with Blizzard and the class design is it's very far behind what players are feeling. Like, for example, Fury Warriors and to a lesser extent Arms Warriors have been saying, like, yeah, and Marksmanship Hunters as well, for years have been saying, hey, our, you know, target cap feels really bad, or requiring me to hit 3 targets in order to activate my AoE feels really bad. And Blizzard, for some reason, is stuck by it for years. Like, they refuse to budge on it, and it's got clear signs of being a detriment to those specs in various ways. Now, Marksmanship Hunter is a little less so right now because they just do crazy damage when they do get their AoE. But for the most part, like, right now, like, Warrior in particular is, like, really down bad when it comes to things like target capping. Windwalker Monk as well. Obviously, these are specs that I play, so I'm very aware of them. The other thing with tier sets is that it influences so much of what your power is going to be. And, you know, for some roles, it's meta defining. I know I talked about not caring about the meta, but, like, the difference between a really good tier set and a really bad tier set is, like, very, very noticeable. Looking at you tanks. You know, for example, in Dragonflight Season 2, the reason that Guardian Druid was the meta tank is because its tier set was very, very powerful, combined with a talent that they got that gave them endless rage economy. So they had overflowing resources that allowed them to be so powerful. Same thing with Blood DK in Season 3, Season 4 of Shadowlands. They had just an incredibly strong tier set that made it so that they basically never died, and they did the most damage in the raid because they constantly had Dancing Rune Weapon up, which meant they basically had 100% uptime on their DPS cooldown. Things like that. So they're way too impactful on what is going to be, you know, quote unquote meta. Like, you hear players all the time, even in their own classes, are like, oh, the Fire Mage set is garbage, so we're not going to be playing Fire Mage because it only gets like a 1% gain off of its tier set, whereas Frost is getting, like a 5% gain. Or Arcane is getting a 12% gain, so we've got to play Arcane Mage now this tier. So you have things like that where players are not really like seeing, like, the gains on the tier sets and stuff like that are not equal. Like, even this PTR cycle, Fury Warrior and Prout Warrior had to see something like a 750% buff to one of their tier set bonuses, because the Mountain Thane bonus, because it was just literally doing nothing. So it's one of those things where I think like it limits Blizzard's ability to do creative and fun things with classes. Like, I firmly believe that if like they removed these tier bonuses and they took some of these ideas and just baked them into the class, you can do them as talent, you can do them as baseline stuff and see how it works. And if it ends up being too powerful or too unintuitive, you just delete them. Like, Blizzard deletes talents all the time. They get rid of talents all the time. Like, it's a very easy way to do that. And then also it removes a lot of like the bloat talents that are sitting there where you get like, here's 2% leech. Why? I don't care. One of the things that I think a lot of players come to WoW for is the way that the combat flows in this game. And when WoW is popular, it's because a lot of the classes play very fun. Like Wrath of the Lich King, obviously, huge villain that everyone loved, and Arthas, but a lot of those classes played really, really well. Like, it was ridiculous how well a lot of those classes played back in WoW. Legion is seen as a very popular expansion. Mist of Pandaria is often lauded as the peak of class design in WoW. Notice those expansions are popular not because necessarily of what they brought to the table. Obviously, some of the content, like Throne of Thunder, is seen as an all-time raid. Legion has a lot of systems that a lot of people look back on fondly, call all-time. The quarter halls and the artifacts and stuff like that. But it's a lot of it is based around the fact that, hey, these classes are fun and they're good. And yes, those expansions had tier, but like a lot of the power of the classes were baked into the design of the classes, not into tier set bonuses. Like, I'm probably going to make a video on this later, but like something like Brewmaster Monk has experienced multiple expansions now where the buttons that you press don't do anything. It's the stuff that you equip that does everything. Tier set's one of the big causes of that. So removing tier sets from a class design perspective, I think, does allow for people to have allows for Blizzard to have more time to invest in class development. Yes, it requires hiring more developers that know the spec, and obviously they just laid off like 9,000 people at Microsoft. I know this is a pipe dream, but like in the ideal world, they have 12, 13 class designers that all they do is work on maybe one class, and then they rotate off just to keep those guys fresh. But removing tier allows Blizzard to be much more aggressive with how they design classes. That's just my opinion. I know that one's probably going to get me flamed a lot because people love their tier set bonuses. It's one of the most exciting things. What's my tier set bonus going to be for the new patch when that news drops? But I'm of the opinion that I don't think they're holistically good for the game right now. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Again, please keep it civil in the comments. Like I said, if you disagree with me, I'm perfectly down with that. I can see why people would disagree with me on all four of these, and that's okay. But these are just what I feel. So if you have any thoughts about it, go ahead and leave that in the comments below. Remember to like, share, subscribe. I'm on the road to, we'll just say 1,200 subscribers, I think is the next 100 milestone I'm at, or 1,100, something like that. So help me out. Just support me in all that realm, all that fun stuff. Till the next video, hope you stay safe. Hope you enjoy yourself. You're having fun. You keep on gaming, and we'll see you next time.